Before we start, I just want to thank Venture Cafe Philadelphia for hosting us today. They have been an amazing partner for the past couple of years. They've done a great job supporting the startup community in the greater Philadelphia area. So thank you so much for doing all of that. And for those of you who are not familiar with the work of Natalie, Tracy, and Jen, they were probably the first people to switch to virtual. So they inspired our organizations to do the same. When the COVID-19 crisis started, we were wondering whether we were going to have this accelerator program, but we were inspired by what Venture Cafe is doing, and we decided to move forward and just have our first virtual cohort. And with that, I just wanted to share my screen and just tell you a little bit more about NextFab for those of you who are not familiar with our organization. Hopefully you can see my screen now. Can you see my presentation or? Yep, great. All right. All right, so NextFab, we are a pre-seed stage hardware-focused investor. We invest in companies that need technical expertise. Some of them might need access to prototyping equipment, and then also access to resource providers. So in 2016, we launched a program, a startup accelerator program that is 12 weeks long. It runs twice per year, in the spring and in the fall of every year. So we typically work with 4 to 5 companies per cohort, and we invest up to $25,000 in each one of the companies that get accepted into the program. In addition to that, we have some follow-on funding that is available for the graduates of this program. So far, since we started in 2016, I believe we've invested about $1 million in about 30 ventures. So today here we have 5 companies that are part of our Spring 2020 cohort. As I mentioned earlier, this is our first virtual cohort. So these entrepreneurs are going to share what they're working on. They will have about 5 minutes to present. And after each presentation, we'll have about 5 minutes for questions and answers. So I would encourage you to use the chat section of Zoom to just share your questions, and then the entrepreneur can read these questions and answer them. With that, I would like to invite the first presenter, Dawn, to share her presentation slides, if she has any.
And Todor, you might need to hit stop screen on yours.
All right. Are we ready to go?
Yep.
All right, guys. Hi, my name is Dawn Myers, founder and CEO at The Most, and we engineer new hardware, new tech, and appliances for women with highly textured hair. So what does that mean? So I don't know if you guys can see me or not, but as you can see, I have a head full of crazy, highly textured, curly, coily, kinky hair. And our hair takes a really long time to style. So I want to pause everybody on the call right now. Think back to the last time that you took a shower, hopefully in COVID, that wasn't too long ago, and washed your hair and got out of the shower. You did whatever you did to your hair. Think about how long that took you. I don't know, some of you it's probably going to be 5 minutes, some of you it's going to be 20 minutes, but for very simple styling, just just being able to keep my hair healthy. Every time I wash my hair, I spend a good 2.5 hours. And that's really on the lower side. As you guys, I'm sure know, there are women with much thicker, much kinkier textured hair. And for them, it can take 4 hours, 6 hours. I've heard things as crazy as 8 hours over the course of 2 days. This is a highly, highly problematic pain point in the lives of millions of women in the US. However, this is also a problem that is kind of designed to be behind the scene. I mean, you guys have heard Beyonce talking about she woke up like this. Guess what? We don't actually wake up like this. It takes a lot of work. And so, you know, I recently, and I'm actually going to share this article in the chat because it's fascinating. There's a woman recently who, you know, she's kept her natural hair hidden from her husband for the past, you know, as long as they've been married, because this is such an emotional process for so many women. There's a lot of pressure for us to conform to kind of mainstream beauty standards. And as we move away from that and move toward being able to embrace our natural hair, we want to make sure that women have the tools they need to hydrate their highly textured hair. You know, this process is extraordinarily cumbersome. It's very complicated. There are lots of steps. You know, when I do my hair, there are, you know, big jars and jugs of oils and creams. It's messy. Your hands get oily and creamy. It's disgusting. And it's also really inconvenient. And so what we're doing is we're creating an all-in-one system that really kind of takes all of your liquid products, takes all of the tools it requires to style, and wraps them up into one kind of seamless unit. And basically, you know, we're looking for easier detangling, faster conditioning, but this really goes much deeper for us than it does than just beauty. For us, this is you know, a pain point that affects women's lives in really visceral ways. So you know, imagine if it takes you 2 to 3 hours to style every time you sweat, every time your scalp gets sweaty, well, you're probably not going to work out as much. And you know, there are lots of studies out there that show that women with textured hair, and Black women in particular, abstain from working out precisely so that they don't have to go through that restyling process. Imagine if you are a working mother with a career and maybe 2 kids with a head full of curly hair. Not only do you have to find the 3 hours to style your hair, you have to find the 3 hours to style theirs as well. It is extraordinarily painful. So this is about, you know, beauty, yes, but it's also about health, wellness, and really critical time savings for this cohort. Now, our technology turns on our, we call them the most minis. They are kind of like Keurig K-Cups, except instead of styling, instead of distributing coffee, they distribute warmed, conditioned liquid products. That renewable solution not only has really awesome kind of licensability, it unlocks convenience for this cohort that currently isn't available with products in the market. So, you know, when we think about our business model, we obviously want to sell direct to consumer through our, you know, almost 10,000 person consumer channel that we've developed through social media and our email list. But we also want to kind of sell through retail. And we envision our products being just like a flat iron or straightener that you find in your hotel room, at the gym, at the salon, at the spa. We want to make sure that our products are there as well, to make sure that this demographic, which is growing very rapidly and will be the new majority in coming decades, is being catered to the same way that we cater to kind of other, you know, kind of traditions. In terms of product development over the past year and a half, we have developed 4 prototypes, and we're just kind of getting our technology tighter and tighter. Obviously, because this is going to be a consumer product that can be used on someone's hair, we want to make sure that it's as tight as possible, and we're getting closer and closer. So we're really excited to work with NextFab and you know, to get our manufacturing processes and infrastructure even tighter than it's been. And we're getting a lot of traction. Not only are we honored to be a part of the NextFab cohort, we've recently also been accepted into Sephora's Luxury Beauty Accelerator program, which is extraordinarily exciting for us. That gives us the chance to meet with some of the biggest names in beauty, some of the biggest buyers in beauty, and investors who are comfortable with, you know, the beauty and hardware space. We also have our patent is pending. We mentioned our over 10,000 person consumer channel through social media and email. We have bootstrapped 4 prototypes and gotten to MVP with very little, you know, capital thus far. We've earned a ton of press recently from Sephora itself, Black Enterprise, Afrotech, and a lot of cosmetology publications as well. We've completed 4 accelerators, and we've been accepted into 2 additional, including NextFab. And so we're learning and really kind of of absorbing all of those lessons. Every quarter we get stronger and stronger. And we've also won national pitch competitions, including Unilever's New Voices pitch competition. And that's really exciting for us because Unilever, of course, is one of the biggest manufacturers of products in the country. And we're catering to an $87 billion unit in the US. Of course, globally, that number is something like 200 billion. And we're really encouraged by the fact that there's an entire continent of people with highly textured hair that tend to be left out of those industry studies. And so we suspect that that market number is actually a lot bigger than reported. We've got big plans, as you can see. We're, again, already having conversations with buyers and partners in the market, and we are really looking to scale this aggressively over the next 5 to 7 years. And over the past couple of years, we've built out a superstar team. Todor was on our investor and partner call this past Friday, and we just had an incredible roster of folks on this call, including Tristan Walker, CEO of Bevel. He's actually the first Black CEO to be acquired by P&G, and so he's giving us the manufacturing roadmap. We also have Jane Carter, one of the biggest names in multicultural beauty, and Barry Lathan, who isn't even on this presentation, who is ex-CEO of Xerox. So we've got some really incredible people, including our core team, who are really passionate about bringing this vision to fruition. So we're really excited to continue this growth. I can't talk. And so here's me. You guys know me. As I mentioned, I've gone through 4 accelerators so far, and I'm really interested in marrying my legal background. I'm a lawyer by training with my kind of management experience working on the business side of major firms and in firms like UBS, Wealth Management. In addition to that, we see this product being something like if you took, Keurig, Dollar Shave Club, and Harry's and rolled it up into one. We've got the subscription model, we've got the intellectual property, we've got the renewables, we've got the hardware game plan, and we think that the most is well positioned to go the distance. So I welcome we're looking for $545,000 in financing or in fundraising in order to kind of really build out our vision, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Anyone can ask? Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So I have curly hair, in case you haven't noticed.
I did, I saw it.
Okay, I was trying to be subtle, but at any rate, I'm not a woman, in case you haven't noticed that either. But just want to make sure. But anyway, would I be able to use the product?
Sure.
Could I use the product?
Yeah, you could. So I'm looking at your hair. So you need a little bit of length in order for this product to be efficacious. You have finer textured hair. And so I don't think that the time savings would be as kind of monumental for you. I mean, for a lot of our customers, we're looking at saving them a half hour to an hour. For you, it may only save a few minutes, but for a lot of men, who aren't looking to spend a whole lot of time on their hair, those few minutes may be really critical. If we can go back outside in the summertime, I'm sure you've experienced, you go out in the rain, you go out
frizzy,
and your hair is a mess, right? And
yeah,
so
you can relate.
Here, yes, the entire point here is to be able to hydrate your hair, to decrease that frizz, and to make it just a little bit easier for you to kind of navigate your world with curly hair.
Okay, and there's no harsh chemicals?
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about those Keurig K-Cups for hair products. We are in the process of partnering with other liquid product brands, other brands that are on the market, so that our consumers can go online, they can pick the product of their choice. We bundle those out in a subscription model, send it to our consumers, and so you would be able to actually have some flexibility in which liquid products you choose. There's also a refillable cartridge option, so that if you have your own gels or curl creams that you use that are completely natural and non-toxic, you can use those as well.
And can it define my curls as well? That's my last question.
Don?
Okay, I'm done. Go ahead. Go ahead, Tony.
Don, Armin has one more question. He doesn't understand the technology and wants you to explain the device a little bit more. I mean, what exactly it does.
So I wish that I had it here to show you guys in real time. That's always a huge help. We actually have our marketing folks who are doing some photography. So basically what we're doing, this isn't a hair straightener. This isn't a curling iron. This isn't a flat iron. The goal here is to hydrate textured hair. And so basically what happens is you take that Most Mini, that cartridge that we showed you, you plug it into the unit. You turn the unit on and it very gently warms those internal liquid products. And then you run that tool through your hair kind of like a straightener, but instead of getting straightened hair, you end up with hydrated hair where that liquid product has been forced through a pump, through a comb, and onto your hair. And so basically what you're getting is a streamlining of two different processes, the process of detangling, which tends to take us a lot of time, and the process of product application. We're kind of marrying those two together and adding in the product conditioning kind of element, which is something that usually is a whole other kind of logistical nightmare for us. So we're kind of combining three processes into one. Does that help?
I think so. Great. Thank you so much, Dawn. And now I think it's time to move to the next presenter, Greg Fridman.
Hi, guys. So this will be a tough presentation following Dawn, which was just awesome. Thanks everybody for inviting our team. So let's try this. Share desktop 1. Can you see my presentation?
Yep.
Excellent, excellent. So our project is a short pulsed plasma system for fresh produce disinfection. This technology has been funded by Defense Logistics, USDA, NSF, Army, NATIC, and now we're part of the NextFab Accelerator. Primarily, our goal with NextFab is to make our system more rugged and more kind of robust. We're partnered with 3 fresh produce suppliers, Santerra, Cox Industrial, and Rava Ranches, and we're also working together with Drexel University. So let me tell you a little bit about what is plasma. Plasma is an ionized gas. We use this ionized gas as a catalyst, as a chemical catalyst to catalyze various industrial applications. Here are some examples. You can use electric discharges to disinfect apples. You can use electric discharges, plasmas, to disinfect water very energy efficiently, very rapidly. Here we're doing some gas processing. We use plasma in medical applications. For treatment of cancers, for example. Very hard to commercialize, very expensive, but it works. Surface treatment, surface modification, all sorts of things like that. Heavy industry gas processing. So what we actually are, we're a group of engineers who use federal funding to de-risk technologies and create spin-off companies. So the company that's in the NextFab Accelerator is GoGGa LLC. It is the fresh produce disinfection during transportation and processing. We have other spin-offs focused on water filter regeneration, and we have a pet project for cats. But today I'll focus on GoGGa. So what's our value proposition? We disinfect food. So it's disinfection from bacteria, viruses, mold, and fungus, specifically of fresh produce. That's the hardest one to disinfect. As a result of disinfecting it, we extend shelf life by up to 3 weeks. We reduce transportation costs. Because shelf life is extended, you can use cheaper transportation, like training or shipping instead of trucking and flying. Obviously, we reduce food waste. So if the food stays longer, you don't throw it out as often. We only use water and electricity. We don't have any additive chemistry, nothing. And we observe no change in any properties of the produce, color, taste, texture, no change while achieving very significant disinfection. Problem is pretty obvious. Foodborne illnesses. We had 420,000 deaths total related to foodborne illnesses. That's a pretty big one, I would think. Food spoilage. A large percentage of food goes to waste because it simply spoils in a store or in transportation. Military logistics. We're funded by military. So it's important for us to address their primary need, which is today they fly food to the soldier. It is very costly. If we can ship it instead of flying it, that would save them significant amount of money. And, you know, food waste. That's, I think, pretty big environmental impact there. Our solution is this box. You can hopefully see what we do. We use plasma to treat whatever is in that box. You know, and we achieve very good antimicrobial, antiviral, and antifungal. I highlighted viral. We've actually, in the last 2 weeks, with enormous help from NextFab, we have retooled this system into PPE disinfection. So we're using this today, not to disinfect food, but to disinfect personal protection equipment. And we actually rolled out first prototype 2 days ago. So it's, in my life, it's unprecedented. Go from a sketch on a napkin to a working prototype in 2 weeks, thanks to NextFab. But anyway, so solution is antimicrobial, antiviral, antifungal while transporting, storing, processing, or shipping food. We connect to any container. We are agnostic to what the container looks like. If you can see, it's that little gray thing sitting on top of the acrylic box. Acrylic box is just for show. What's important is the gray connector. We can connect to anything. It's very easy for us to scale. So we've actually designed the system for a 53-foot trailer that's unfortunately sitting at NextFab, and we don't have access to it. So we're very anxious for NextFab to reopen. But anyway, so this is a scalable solution as well. Market opportunity, well, it's pretty big, I guess. We can work with growers. They have highest control of the fresh fruits and vegetables packaging, processing. We can prevent their losses from food recalls and food advisories. We work with processors. Food processors are far more advanced than you think they are. They use multi-million-dollar, very high-tech, high-control equipment. So it's easy for us to connect to them. And we can disinfect before, during, and after packaging of fresh produce. We work with shippers. They're only concerned about, those guys are not concerned about anything but food waste. So we work with them to extend shelf life. And of course, you know, the holy grail is your refrigerator. This is a very your refrigerator is a very expensive place to be in. It costs about $60+ million to go through regulatory approval. But the holy grail is everyone's refrigerator. And, you know, awesome, LG, on Best Buy here, they're already selling something that they call kimchi fridge that uses ultraviolet to clean your food, to remove smell from your fridge. So this one you can buy, and it's a couple of $1,000s. So LG is very thankful to them, paving the way for us. So in a very nutshell, this is our technology. I'm very happy to answer your questions, and I'm always available on the email. So feel free to contact me offline. Any questions? Oh, one new message. What's the story of the name? And it's by Shelley, so you don't know. GoGGa has almost no meaning outside of, it means a little bug in Afrikanese. Sometimes in Africa, they refer to ladybugs as GoGGa. Ladybugs are very good for the farmland. They eat certain parasites. So that's good. Lucky I happen to own that domain for the last 15, 17, 18, 19 years. GoGGa is my nickname. So it actually has no meaning other than it's my name in a different language. It means Greg. Who do I see as competitors? What are the barriers of entry in your opinion? Is the FDA approval required? You see, it's a very large industry. It's about $1 trillion a year industry, and we can separate it into, in my presentation, I separated into 4 markets: growers, processors, shippers, and home use. There's also grocery store who I'm not going after at all. I don't want to deal with them, too complicated. Growers, processors, shippers, and in-home are regulated differently. FDA is involved at some of those stages, not as much in early stages with the growers, but they are involved. Who are my competitors? Everybody. You know my biggest competition? You'd be surprised. Do you know what the military does today to disinfect fresh produce? It is my biggest competitor. The biggest competitor I have. You know what it is? Nothing. So what do you do to disinfect fresh produce when you buy it? You use my competing technology. The highest used technology out there. Nothing. Okay, next question. What types of food does it work on? How long is the process? It works on anything. Shoes, toothbrushes, hairbrushes, personal protection equipment, apples, oranges. We are testing, we're funded by military. Military has specifically requested to test E. coli, Salmonella, Listeria, and Bacillus, forget which one, Bacillus cereus and Candida albicans. So we're testing bacteria and fungus on spinach, kale, strawberries, and kale, spinach, lettuce, and strawberries. Those are the pretty easier to spoil. Like oranges and bananas, they don't spoil as easily. So that's what we're testing now, but it will work on anything. Previously, it was used to disinfect meat, for example. So technology itself will work on anything, but keep in mind the approval pathway is different. Chicken is different than fish. So when I said it's $60 million to get it into your fridge, we're gonna have to go through approval for everything separately. That's why it's 60 million. Chicken, different than fish, different than eggs. It's a lot of work.
Great, we'll have to move to the next presentation, but Don has a question for you. I guess you can answer this offline. The next presenter is Gurkern with Ravata Solutions. Gurkern, would you be able to share your screen now?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to be able to share a little bit about Ravata to you guys. Let me go ahead and make this guy a little bit bigger. Okay. So I am Gurkern, the CEO and founder of Ravata Solutions, where we have developed an embryo health diagnostic to improve the in vitro fertilization pregnancy success rates. So the device itself is a little chip like this. It's a microfluidic based system. And this is one unit, and we have a desktop system that these guys plug into. And most of the analysis that we're going to talk about later on is done in this little component. So with that, we can go ahead forward. So I want to start with talking a little bit about in vitro fertilization today, and why is this becoming a bigger and bigger issue, not only in this decade, but for this generation. So 1 in 8 patients is actually, or 1 in 8 couples is actually suffering from some sort of infertility. This is either on the male side or the female side. And this is actually kind of scary because the number of patients that actually get to go to the clinic is significantly less than the number that are infertile. And one of the main barriers to this is the cost of in vitro fertilization. So now the rise in use of IVF is coming for 2 factors, really. one is what we would expect, just typical medical conditions that are going to stay at about the same rate, so long as the population grows at the same rate. But those conditions are the base of IVF, but the growth in IVF is actually coming from, for example, the environmental toxins and damages that we're getting from that, but even more so just the social shift that folks are having to having children later in life. We see this from folks who they may not start to have their first kid until they're getting to 28, or they're getting to 30, or they're getting to 32, or they're getting to 34, and really about 32 is when IVF starts to become relevant. And so what we see from this chart is that from 1980 to 2016, this is the average first-time age of mothers, and it's shifting incredibly far to the right. So many of those patients that are having their children and wanting to start their families later are falling under this this category of needing IVF. That's why they say freeze your eggs. So with this increasing rise in IVF, I wanted to also kind of explain the process a little bit, use this as an informational opportunity to also explain where do we fit into this process. So there's a lot of issues with IVF that are, like we mentioned, medical, and every single one starts with this ovarian stimulation. These are the injections that they're talking about that are very draining. But then there's also another round later near the end. So these injections get the eggs out. Generally, when you go to a further along age, 32, 33, 34, 35, your egg quality starts to deteriorate. And that's one issue with males as well. Their sperm motility decreases. So we get the eggs, then we take them and we analyze the sperm. We identify which ones are the best ones, and then we put those into stage 4, which is the IVF itself. This is just 4 hours of letting them naturally meet and fertilize. And then it goes to the embryo development, which is the part that Ravata starts to become involved, which is now you have a few of these embryos that have been developed. You've gone through so much already. And generally what happens is they'll put 2 or 3 embryos in because they want the best success. And this is a subjective mechanism. We'll explain that in a second. But Ravata scores these embryos for which ones are the healthiest, most viable, and those are suggested for transfer. And this would be in the human space. Now, the main challenge where we benefit is, or not where we benefit, where we provide benefit, is a lot of the cost of this comes from the failed IVF cycles. So having to consistently over and over again retry these attempts, and there is no insurance for this because of the cost of IVF. So you end up getting people going up to about like 20 to 40K in debt to go through IVF. So it becomes an equality issue of who can actually afford IVF and who can't. It starts to bring up like how do we close that gap? So by improving the embryo selection and having one IVF, essentially waiting until you have that embryo that's the best quality and then going forward with it. That is how we can bring down this IVF success rate, or bring down this IVF failure rate, and make this more attainable. Then there's another direction with insurances. The practice of using insurance for this is increasing. There's actually quite a few IVF insurance providers coming to market now. Huge area for venture capital investment. And what happens is these folks, they go to certain clinics, designated clinics, and on top of that, these IVF insurance providers realize that if we go and put 2 embryos in, you might have a twin. And when you have a twin, the post-birth, the ICU costs are about $100,000 each. And if you have triplets, it's about $250,000 each, coming out to about $750,000 if you have triplets. So that's where the problem of putting in multiple embryos is magnified for insurance companies. And so this is one of the directions to actually get IVF into a covered practice. So the problems with embryo selection are mainly that it's all visual. You look at it, and that's a doctor of 20 years of experience who wears glasses tells you which one's healthiest and which one's not, and then goes with those. And with the way that we approach this is with the impedance, a data-driven selection mechanism. So we look at the impedance of these cells, and at the lower sensing frequencies, we can tell volume displacement, we can tell some features about the cell's surface charge. But as we start to go up to higher frequencies, we can start to get past that outer shell and start to see what's going on inside. And really, one of the key ways to know if a cell is going to be developing well is what's going on with the mitotic spindle and its division. Okay, so our competitors are pre-implantation genetic screening and time-lapse incubation. They both are intended to identify what is the best cell to go forward with, but they both have their limitations. What we would have to go through the FDA to get this out to the clinical use. If we are not predicting embryo viability, then it's a class 2. If we're predicting embryo viability, then it's class 3. So we can be a diagnostic of the class 2. But this isn't something that's only relevant to humans. It's also relevant to a massive market that relies on IVF in the mouse and livestock space. So far, we've worked with several different academics and companies to be able to actually produce a system to, in the IVF aspect of their work, help them in the gene editing extension. So they perform IVF most of the time, but there is an additional tweak that they use CRISPR-Cas9 for, and we assisted in that, making a very successful product for them. So that was our starting point, and building on that traction, we're now moving into a broader automation strategy. And the market for this looks like about 1.1 billion for all the animals, and by 2021, the middle of it, we look to be collecting some human embryo data. Right now, it's been a lovely road starting since about early. It was, oh my God, there was a time that it wasn't incorporated, so it's been a while. But the alpha tests were done in 2018, getting some proof of concept and some revenue going in there. And then finally, we'll be commercializing 2 systems and bringing on another collaborator for a dedicated system. That's Ravata Solutions. I will go ahead and look at the questions that we have put up, but I can also take them verbally. Let me go ahead and open this up. My bad.
What's Ravata mean?
Oh, Ravata so in Sanskrit, there's the word Ravate, which is antidote doctor. And so that it's a difference from what typically you consider a pharmacist, because the antidote doctor was supposed to, they were a slightly more traditional provider of the medication, going into like just the herbs. And so that is, the idea was that they're not selling snake oil as well. So the Ravate that's where that comes from. And it was adapted to Ravata to be able to flow off the tongue a little bit easier.
Cool.
Great. Gurkern, we'll have time for one more question.
Sorry, I went long. Can someone read one off? I don't know why I can't find it now. Here.
What is cell impedance?
More. Oh, cell impedance. So cell impedance is a measurement of you have your capacitance and your reactance, your reactance and your capacitance simultaneously. And this is a higher, when you're measuring at a higher frequency, it's the resistance that you're getting from a material, as well as the capacitive elements that affect your circuit. So the best way to describe this is like when we think about traditional circuits and we see a DC, your resistance is just like 10 ohms. You measure it as 10 ohms because you'll have at a low frequency a V equals IR drop. Impedance, on the other hand, goes into a higher frequency, which means that you also take into effect the effect of capacitance on your signal. So you have your drop in amplitude and your phase as well. The impedance is basically a combination of your capacitive and resistive elements in a circuit.
Great. Thank you, Gurkern. You have to stop sharing your screen.
Yes, I will do that.
Okay.
Bada bing.
Great, thank you. And the next presenter is Johnathan from Volta Therapeutics. Johnathan, would you be able to share your screen now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
So let me know if you guys can see this. I'll jump right in.
Yep, we can see it.
Fantastic. So hi, guys. Quick introduction. We are Volta Therapeutics. I don't think anyone else from my team's here. I'm John. I'm the CEO and co-founder. I'll give you a little bit of a background. My background's biomedical engineering. Recently graduated from Drexel University, and this was actually a senior design project, a spinoff that we turned into a startup company after we got the project complete at the Singh Center over at UPenn. So I work in the cell therapy space, and it's a bit complex and interesting. So there's a bit of a learning curve that I'll walk you guys through as we go. And, we'll get into the meat of what we're doing here at Volta. So cell therapy is actually a component of the advanced therapy market, which is where I've worked. And what you're seeing here, there's about 1,000 clinical trials, over 900 companies globally that are doing some type of advanced therapy. So this goes beyond traditional pharmaceuticals. And what you're seeing at the bottom there is the different branches. So I can touch upon these just a bit. I won't go into too much detail here, but gene therapy is a type of therapy that's used when you use genes to treat a person. For example, using a good virus, the COVID, there's a negative spin on virus now, but they can actually be good. They could be genetically modified. And for example, you could dose a patient with cells or viruses rather, that act like a Trojan horse, and they'll deliver genes into the cells. And for example, turn a sickled cell into a normal cell, right? And then there's other applications there. Outside of the gene therapy, you can use gene modification methods to modify cells. And then you're dosing the patient with cells instead of virus. And one of the great examples there is CAR T therapy, if you guys are familiar. That's a T cell therapy that's used to treat cancer. So you take the blood from a patient, you modify those T cells, and then you put them back in the patient's body and they fight off the cancer. So really interesting. And this is kind of the area that we're looking at. And then just for reference here, the cell therapy and tissue engineering. Cell therapy is just traditional cells. They might be stem cells, something of that sort. And then tissue engineering, that's a more complex system with scaffolds and multiple different cell types. But obviously with the advanced therapy space, there's some pretty big hurdles that have to be overcome when making a cellular therapy. One of those things is scale up. So unlike traditional therapies and drugs, they're not made in large bioreactors or chemical reactors at scales of hundreds of liters. Rather, this is at a milliliter scale, comes from the patient and goes back in their body. So it's not a scale up process, it's a scale out process, and puts a lot of constraints there. There's also huge capacity issues. Part of the problem of dealing with cells is that you have to keep them alive and happy, which is a challenge. So you have to do this in a clean room suite, and that requires a lot of infrastructure. For example, if you're a pharmaceutical company and if you have 10 rooms, you can only do 10 patients per month, let's say, if the process takes a month, right? Going over costs, another big issue in this industry. CAR T therapy, that T cell fighting cancer type of treatment, is actually $500,000 per infusion. Obviously, big issues there, covering costs and being able to give patients what they need to save their lives. And then regulatory hurdles, controlling the process. If you look in the bottom corner there, having full visualization of the process. It's a current big challenge in the industry. And part of that is because of the lacking system capabilities. So this is actually the CAR T therapy model. So that process I told you, taking the blood from the patient there on the left, and then passing them through all of these different devices, ultimately creating T cells that fight cancer. And you dose those T cells back into the patient's body on the left side. So you do all that processing, but it's all controlled with different devices, often strung together with tubing and bags. And there's not much to do there. But there's actually a couple of companies that have come out with a few technologies, to name the two biggest ones. That's Miltenyi and Lonza. So they've built this type of device, and as you see, you kind of pass those cells and other materials through it. But there's actually limited process customization. So you're forced into whatever process is stuck in place here. And you have to use patented materials and things like that from the customers, or from the vendor rather, the Lonza and Clinimax. So that's the big challenge there. And then you also can't really go from small volume to clinical volume. So if you're just testing this out, it's a real challenge to go from a low volume to a high volume. And then on top of that, there's no testing. So even if you make this incredible cell product on this device, you can't test it and ensure that it's safe and that there's no, other materials inside of it that you don't want to put in the patient's body when you're done. So what we're looking to do is what we're calling the Volta Loop. Not a very fun name. We're coming up with something better, but this is kind of the pipeline dream here, creating an end-to-end automation platform that's extremely flexible. So that involves plug-and-play modules or cartridges. And what you're seeing there is maybe a cartridge or a chip. And so that's where it goes really, from chip to cartridge. We're talking about scalability, that next point. So being able to go from microliter volumes to milliliter volumes and spend less in your development and get to clinical trials faster through that scalability. Capacity. One of the things that we're really going to hope to do with this type of technology is actually bring it next to the patient's bedside. We'll eliminate that need for the clean room in manufacturing suites and hopefully completely decentralize this. So that's pretty revolutionary. We'll have to keep the cells happy and put an enclosure around this, some type of housing that keeps it sterile and clean. But that will ultimately lead to our end-to-end automation. And then part of that will also be that testing, the crucial part, where you have to test the product for safety before going back into the patient's body. So there's a couple modules or cartridges or chips, lab on a chip things that will add to this to expand our platform in the future. To give you guys a sense of where we're at, we've completed a cartridge prototype. I'll show you a picture of that on the next slide. So that's complete. And then we're currently working at NextFab to build our subsystems and sensors. And we're going to create what we're calling really the alpha prototype of everything. And then moving forward, what we'd hope to do is get some patents out of that, get some biological testing out of that, and then ultimately push for that pipeline dream, that beta prototype. What you saw on the other slide, that big system with multiple cartridges and modules, some type of end-to-end, a true end-to-end manufacturing platform. And we'll be looking to exit and commercialize, one or the other. So this is how far we've gone. This is our cartridge that we built. This is some of the traction. We actually got $10,000 from the Singh Center for Nanotechnology to build this over there. Some of our novel components there, the electrodes and magnetic traps that do this cell isolation with magnetic beads, and then gene delivery. Instead of a virus, we're actually shotgunning genes in there with electricity, a little bit safer in an interesting mechanism. And that's our cartridge, right? So we're looking to get some patents out of this, optimize that a little bit, and then build our system to connect to it and really get some biological data and patents and raise our valuation for a good solid raise. We're looking for about 250K there. And a big shout out to our team. So over here is most of the guys that built this. And just to bring your attention to the bottom corner there, Dr. Ravata works over at the Perelman Center for Advanced Cancer Treatment. And he's actually a big forefront runner in the CAR T space. So he's working alongside Carl June, doing a lot of this CAR T stuff. And he's been a great resource with developing our technology. And then Noah Clay is the director over at the Singh Center. He's really helped us with our cartridge designs and all the microfabrication that we were doing. So yeah, that's what I had to share with you guys. Take any questions. I really kind of breezed through that. I wanted to make sure that you all had a good understanding of some of the background there. It's a pretty deep, topic. Cell therapy is pretty huge. So.
Awesome, thank you. We might be able to take maybe one or two questions.
I could see what we got in there.
All right, it seems like there are no questions for John right now, but if you do have any questions, just share these in the chat section. We have to move to the next presenter, and the next presenter is Nick from Andluca Technologies. Nick, could you please share your screen?
Nick, I think you might be muted, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute you.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I saw my milestone scheduled there for a second. All right, so it's gonna be a quick 5-minute pitch. Let you guys know what we're working on. Andluca is a company that came out of Princeton following my PhD. We had some press in the Wall Street Journal where they called what we were doing sunglasses for your windows. So I kind of just stuck with that. I think it's easy to understand on the fly. So here we go. So daylighting is actually the most requested design element in architecture. It's not going to be news to anybody in Center City. We have a ton of glass facades, skyscrapers, the idea is that, having access to daylight, it allows you to be more creative, actually be healthier. There's studies that show you have fewer days sick when you have access to daylight, you spend more time on work, you sleep better. In Europe, there's actually like laws and regulations that when you build buildings, you have to have a certain amount of daylight because of these studies. So that's great, but what it turns out happens, we don't like glare. So there's studies that have been done. If you look at a skyscraper and you look at south facing, east facing, west facing, especially windows, the blinds basically don't move. So people put up blinds 59% of the time, windows are kept covered all the time because of glare. And throughout a day, only like 3% of blinds are even moved. So these are, operable coverings that people just don't fool with. So we have all this glass, and there's this great design that goes behind it to give us daylighting, but we're not actually benefiting from daylighting. What we are doing is we're spending a lot of money on energy due to the solar heat gain that's coming through these windows. About 52 billion in the US is just wasted energy due to inefficient windows. And because buildings are the biggest contributor to our carbon footprint as a country, this is a major problem. So 40% of the US carbon footprint is attributed to buildings. And over 50% of the buildings we have in place now will still be in use in 2050, which means that this is a problem that's not going away and we have to solve it. A lot of these sustainable building technologies, green building technologies, are focused on new construction. So what we're doing is focusing on these existing buildings and trying to solve a kind of hairy problem with solutions that are easy to use and affordable. So one solution that's out there is actually called electrochromic glass. So this is glass that intelligently changes its tint. So it needs power to do this. So it's wired into the building. It's used in new construction predominantly right now. It can give you big savings in energy efficiency. What we see here up to 40%. So you are essentially controlling solar heat gain before it comes in the building. And this is the feeling of the sun that you feel on your skin that makes you hot. This is radiative heating in the infrared and also in the visible. But also this type of control of glare, it helps reduce eye strain, reduce headaches, reduce drowsiness. All of these things lead to improvements in employee productivity and improvements in well-being. So this type of technology, it can get you, your LEED certification points for having a green building, but it also gets you something called WELL certification, which is toward occupant health and wellness. So as I mentioned, this is great, except, you probably haven't heard of this technology because it's a niche technology that is wired, and it's really only relevant for big budget projects, building headquarters, new construction. But it turns out there's been a lot of investment in this space. One of the leading companies got a 1.1 billion from SoftBank. So it's something that a lot of money is going into. A lot of manufacturing volume is improving, but it's really just for new construction. So what we did is we essentially studied this area and we created a wireless version of this technology. We're not creating electrochromic glass. We actually created a transparent solar technology to marry with the electrochromic glass. So what you're seeing here is a wireless version of this. So essentially we have two panes in this glass. One's the electrochromic, and then another is the transparent solar. And then we have hardware that we've hidden in the perimeter. So you basically have this wireless smart window now where you're using ultraviolet light for energy. So you have ultraviolet light converted to electricity, and then you're using that electricity to control the visible light and the infrared light that's coming through. So you're using the whole solar spectrum, and it's a self-contained system. So this system requires no external wiring or specialized labor. When I say specialized labor, I'm referring to electrician labor, which is unionized labor, which really drives up the cost of projects and makes this type of technology inaccessible for most customers. So with this, we can transform any window into a high performance facade, and ultimately it will pay for itself with energy savings. We originally published this in Nature Energy and then went, with the NSF's help to start commercializing the technology. And now with NextFab, we're working on our first product. This product is a retrofittable version of the wireless system. So what we're doing is we're actually, for existing buildings, you leave the glass in place, which helps reduce waste. And we are retrofitting the glass with an additional pane. So we're going from single pane glass to double or triple pane, where now we have the smart EV platform, which is what Andluca makes. So this is we're capturing ultraviolet light. We're converting it to electricity. And then we source electrochromic glazing. This is the active glazing. This is your sunglasses that can change their tint with an electrical actuation. We source those from suppliers, existing manufacturers, and help them increase their throughput, help them increase their revenue, and access the existing building customer segment. So this is what it looks like. You install from the inside. It can be done in a do-it-yourself manner if it's in a residential home. Commercial and project, you do it using window glazers. It's not just about tinting though. We have 100% UV blocking. We capture it for solar power. You can use that to charge your smartphone, especially in an emergency situation where you have lost power. We do have the dynamic tinting, but there's also thermal and sound benefits. So the space will be quieter and you'll feel more comfortable in the space because we're keeping out heat in the summer and we're keeping out cold in the winter better. And you also have this AI component. So we have IoT sensors on board that are powered by this transparent solar. So you're able to integrate with the other smart things in your building, like smart lighting, your Nest, your smart thermostat, Alexa, so that you can control the windows verbally to say it's too bright in here or I'm feeling warm, what have you. So it's a very intelligent system. And this is a space we're playing in. So this is, I have wireless smart windows and wired smart windows on the x-axis. So all these companies are wired smart window companies that are sort of competitors, sort of suppliers. So it's a little bit of a dance on how this model works. And then there's a range of economy products to premium products. So really, we can source the electrochromic glass from any of these companies. We use our UV solar to make it a wireless solution, and we can service a variety of customers, whether they want a premium solution like a hotel, like a Marriott, or an economy solution, which would be more towards a residential space. So we're operating in this white space, which is about a $7.3 billion market of wireless smart glass for existing offices and homes especially. And then later on down the line, we'll do some other segments, hospitality, healthcare, things like that. So this is the revenue model. We're sourcing from these EC suppliers at a certain price per square foot of glass. We convert it to a wireless system, which is, we take the glass, it has little pigtails, we integrate it with the UV power pane, which is our product. We add hardware, we assemble it, and then we deliver it at a higher price. And these are the customers that we work with. You have building developers, you have real estate investment trusts. This is like your CBRE in New York that, big landlord, they own many, many buildings for offices. And the gatekeepers here are the architects and the engineers. So we work with all those stakeholders to raise awareness of our products. And I want to mention digital decarbonization. So later on down the line, the more windows that we deploy, the more we'll have network effects, or we're getting data from all these windows. We can use that data that we're getting back from the sensors in the windows to provide additional value. So, okay, we can tell you that smart lighting can help you, your air quality is bad, your HVAC needs to be replaced, but it can be replaced with a smaller system, things like that for the user. And then actually for the utilities, we can provide energy forecasting because we know as sunlight is coming through the window that the HVAC is going to kick on like before it happens. So we can support energy trading and digital decarbonization in that way. So it's a secondary revenue opportunity, as we mature. This is where we are. We're in product development with NextFab. Later this year, we'll be doing testing and validation. Then we'll move into beta projects. So this is going to be residential projects, 10 to 20 windows. And then next year is when we have slated early adopter projects. So these are more think offices, larger projects. This is the last slide. So the team, I founded the company with Professor Lynn Liu at Princeton, she's a director of the Andluca Center for Energy Environment. So it's kind of a think tank on these types of issues. We brought on Darren as an independent board member who he is the founder of a clean tech company, Princeton Power Systems. And then I recruited 3 guys. So Adrian Winono is from the smart glass space. He's an operations and product person. Quinn is a VP of R&D. He is essentially leading the solar cell research. And then Lou is from Sage Glass, who was the original smart glass company. He was a VP of sales and marketing for them. And now he's going to be our director of sales. So I wanted to have my contact info right here if any of you guys want to reach out with questions. I know we're wrapping up here. So if we don't get to the questions, please reach out to me at nick@andluca.com.
Nick, I think we have time for one question. Bruce is asking, how is the optical clarity?
Bruce, optical clarity. Great question. So yeah, our UV PV pane is like 90% transparent, and in terms of color aesthetics, it's relatively color neutral. So the aesthetics of the product are really dominated by the electrochromic glass that we choose. And each company's glass has a little bit different aesthetics and also price point and some other properties. So the customer kind of dictates what type of glass they want. Our UV pane essentially disappears into the rest of the product.
Great. So this concludes today's session. I would like to encourage everyone who is interested in learning more about NextFab and these companies to check our website. Also send me an email if you need to get in touch with these entrepreneurs. We'd love to put you in touch with them. And if you're interested in learning more about joining the next cohort, definitely reach out to me. Natalie, do you have anything else to add?
No, thank you so much. These presentations were all fantastic and the products are incredible. So we wish you the best of luck, and thank you for sharing with Venture Cafe this evening, and many thanks again to NextFab for partnering with us to have this awesome presentation.
Thank you for hosting us.
Of course.
All right, have a good night.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.